The restaurant's rooftop glittered with fairy lights, overlooking the skyline that pulsed like a heartbeat against the night. At a corner table, Ethan Blake, one of the city's most powerful billionaires, sat alone, swirling the ice in his untouched glass. To anyone watching, he looked composed. Tailored suit, perfect posture, calm expression, but inside he was done. Done with pretending to care, done with blind dates his well-meaning friends kept setting up. He didn't believe in love anymore. It had left him once, years ago, and he'd buried that part of himself under numbers, deals, and empty success. Tonight was supposed to be one last courtesy, one final blind date before he told everyone to stop trying. He checked his watch. Affirmative 13. She was already 15 minutes late. Typical, he thought. He was about to text his assistant to call it off when the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. A woman stepped out, her hair damp from the rain, clutching a small purse like she wasn't sure she belonged there. She wore a simple navy dress, nothing extravagant, but something about the way she carried herself, shy but steady, made the entire room fade for a moment. "Mr. Blake?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. He looked up. "You must be Claire?" She smiled nervously. "Yes, sorry I'm late. The cab got stuck in traffic and then I realized I left my umbrella." "It's fine," he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Please sit." The first few minutes were awkward. Ethan was polite but distant, the way he was in every meeting. Claire fidgeted, clearly uncomfortable in the lavish setting. She glanced at the golden cutlery and whispered, "I've never been in a place like this." He looked up, surprised. "Really?" She laughed softly. "I usually eat dinner in my car between shifts. I'm a nurse." Something in her tone disarmed him. There was no shame in her words, just honesty. He leaned forward, curious despite himself. "A nurse? That's admirable. Must be exhausting." She smiled faintly. "It can be, but it's worth it when someone opens their eyes after days in a coma, or when a kid stops crying because you tell them they'll be okay." For the first time that night, Ethan didn't check his watch. He listened, and with every word she spoke, something in him, something cold and buried, began to thaw. They talked about everything and nothing. Life, hope, exhaustion, coffee. She didn't ask him about his wealth, his company, or the Forbes cover. She didn't care. When she spoke, she looked straight at him, not at the name behind him. By dessert, Ethan realized he was smiling, genuinely smiling, for the first time in years. As they walked out of the restaurant, rain still whispered against the city. He offered her his coat. "I'm fine," she protested. "Humor me," he said quietly, draping it over her shoulders. They shared an umbrella as they walked toward her car, the silence between them no longer awkward but warm. When they reached the parking lot, she hesitated. "Thank you," she said softly. "For tonight. I almost didn't come." "Why?" he asked. She laughed nervously. "Because I thought it was a joke. A billionaire wanting to meet a nurse? It sounded like something out of a bad romance movie." He smiled, something wistful in his eyes. "Funny. I thought the same thing, that someone like you wouldn't show up for a man like me." For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then she said, "Maybe the world's full of surprises, Mr. Blake." He chuckled. "Ethan, please, just Ethan." She nodded, cheeks flushed. "Then good night, Ethan." He watched her drive away, rain glinting off her taillights like tiny stars. For once, the silence didn't feel empty. Days passed. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she smiled when she talked about her patients, the way she looked at the city like it still had beauty left in it. He'd met hundreds of people, but none like her. He found himself driving by the hospital where she worked, watching the nurses hurry in and out under the flickering streetlights. One night, he saw her again, outside the emergency entrance, helping an elderly man into a cab. She looked exhausted, her hair tied messily, but her kindness never dimmed. On impulse, he stepped out of his car. "Claire!" She turned, startled. "Ethan, what are you—" "I was in the area," he said awkwardly. "Thought I'd check if you wanted coffee." She smiled, amused. "You just happened to be in the area near a hospital at midnight?" He chuckled. "Caught me." They ended up sitting on the curb outside, sharing coffee from a vending machine. It was bitter, lukewarm, and perfect. You know, she said, staring at the lights. People always think billionaires have it easy, but sometimes you guys look lonelier than anyone else. He looked at her. You're not wrong, she turned to him. Then maybe you should stop hiding behind your money. He nodded slowly, her words hitting deeper than she knew. Weeks passed and their worlds began to blend. Ethan started showing up at the hospital with takeout for the night shifts, helping fund supplies anonymously. Claire tried to resist falling for him, but it was impossible. He wasn't the cold CEO anymore. He was the man who stayed up late just to make her laugh, who listened, who cared. But one evening, her world cracked. A hospital journalist discovered that the Ethan Blake had been visiting regularly, and soon headlines screamed about the billionaire dating a nurse. Paparazzi camped outside her building. Her co-workers whispered. When she saw him again, she was furious. You should have told me who you really were. I tried, he said, his voice breaking. But every time I looked at you, I didn't want to be Ethan Blake, the billionaire. I just wanted to be Ethan. Your Ethan. Tears filled her eyes. You don't understand. My life isn't built for your world. I can't live under your spotlight. He took a step closer. Then I'll step out of it. She shook her head. It's not that simple. He looked at her, desperate. Claire, I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who only saw my bank account. You saw me. Don't take that away. But she turned and walked away, her heart breaking with every step. A month later, the hospital held a charity gala. Claire attended reluctantly, helping organize silent auctions and donations. When she looked at the donor list, one name made her freeze. Anonymous benefactor, $5 million. Midway through the evening, the doors opened. Ethan stood there wearing the same simple black suit he'd worn on their first date. The room buzzed, cameras flashing, but his eyes found hers instantly. He walked up to her, ignoring everyone else, and said quietly, You were right. I can't buy happiness, but maybe I can earn it, one chance at a time. The room fell silent as he took her hand. One final blind date, Claire. This time no secrets, no headlines, just us. Her lips trembled as tears filled her eyes. You never gave up, did you? He smiled gently. Not on the one thing that made me believe again. She stepped closer, whispering, Then maybe this time, I won't either. The crowd watched as she rested her head against his chest, the city lights reflecting in her tears. Somewhere far below the noise and wealth and expectations, two broken people found the courage to love again, not because of who they were, but because of who they became when they found each other. And for Ethan Blake, the lonely billionaire who once thought love was a joke, that final blind date became the beginning of everything he never knew he was missing.